this tutorial, we'll go through how to use the warp function. This is the process of getting your songs and samples synced up so that they play in time with live, and is probably the most important feature to become confident at using. Once your audio files have been warped, you'll be able to easily mix between any of your music, knowing that it will stay perfectly in time throughout. If you're a DJ who's used to mixing on vinyl or CD, this is the feature that will ensure you never need to worry about your mix going out of time again. Okay, let's begin by importing a drum loop so that we can start to see how warp markers work. I'm going to open the browser, find the Ableton DJ Course folder, audio files, and drag in the file Funky Drum Loop. When the file is imported, Live will automatically warp it. If this doesn't happen, then click on the warp button. The clip is now in warp mode and will play back at the project tempo, no matter what speed it was originally recorded at. I'll also turn on loop so that it will repeat, and let's see how it sounds. The first thing you notice is that there is a silence at the start and end of the clip, meaning that it's not looping properly. To solve this, we need to place warp markers to show live where the start and end should be. Click at the top of the sample display and drag down to zoom in on the start of the audio. If you look carefully above the first beat, you can see a tiny mark or a triangle. This is a suggestion by Live of where a warp marker could go, and if you double click on this, it creates a yellow warp marker in this position. When you're positioning warp markers, try to do it as accurately as you can. Look for the thick waveform indicating where the beat hits, and place the marker directly to the left of this. Next, remove the warp marker that Live positioned at the start of the clip by double clicking on it. Now drag the marker we've just positioned so that it becomes at the start of beat 1 according to the timeline. Now we need to double click to place a warp marker where the audio ends. Finally, remove the original marker that we don't need and drag the new marker so it's positioned at the start of bar 2. You can now hear that the clip repeats smoothly. What I have noticed is the timing of the loop isn't quite right. If you look carefully at where the beats fall, you can see that it hasn't been played very accurately, and a number of the beats are out of time. I'll put the metronome on so that I have something to play in time with, and I can now add warp markers in until the clip sounds right. You can now hear that the drum loop is playing perfectly in time with Live. So now we've seen how to warp a short sample, let's have a look at warping a full song. I'm going to import Narc and Jester's track, Electribe, from the browser. On being imported, Live automatically places a number of warp markers in place. However, it's actually placed rather a lot of these, and it's hard to see what's going on. You could carry on and leave these how Live has positioned them, but to get the best results you should do this manually. When warping audio clips, it's easiest to have them playing at their original speed, and so to find this out, look at the box marked seg BPM. You can now adjust the project tempo to match the tempo of the file. The first job to do is to ensure that the first beat of the record is in the right place. Zoom in on the start and position a warp marker immediately before the first beat. If you find that the record you're warping has a beatless or ambient intro, ignore the intro for now and instead put the first warp marker at the start of the first beat. You should then right-click and select Set 111 here. After you finish warping the rest of the clip, you can come back and sort out the intro. Once you've placed your first warp marker, right-click on this and select Warp from here straight. This removes all the warp markers that have been positioned by Live and simply warps the file according to its tempo. Now, have a look at the waveform and see where else you can find to obviously place warp markers. If it looks like the clip is staying in time because the beats are lined up closely with Live's bar lines, then you can go straight to the end of the clip and position a warp marker here. Then you can look for positions at regular intervals throughout the clip to make sure that it stays in time for its whole duration. You'll find that most music is fairly logical, and you can often spot clear points in the record where the warp markers should be positioned, such as every 16 or 32 bars. Once you've got a number of warp markers placed, zoom out and turn on the metronome. This will give out a constant beat, and you can click along the scrub area at the top to see if the song stays in time with it. You can hear that the metronome has stayed in time throughout the song, and so I know that the warping process has been successful. If you find that you're having trouble when warping a clip, you'll have to slow down and go through it more carefully. Get your first warp marker into position, and then find a second warp marker close to it, maybe 4 or 8 bars later. Next, use the Warp from here straight command from the second warp marker. Then keep clicking through the clip, putting warp markers every few bars until it stays in time. Once the clip is warped, you can come back and sort out the intro if you need to. However, you may find that for many songs it's actually easiest to skip it altogether, because you're only likely to want to mix the song from where the beat comes in. If you do want to keep it, the best way to do it is to work out a logical number of bars to have played before the beat drops. For example, if you set the intro to 16 bars, then you can have an ambient intro that starts the song, and then it drops perfectly into the beat 16 bars later. Try doing that on a set of vinyl decks. Before you can finish the process of setting up the audio file, there are a couple more things to do. Have a look visually at how loud the waveform appears to be. Some files will be louder than others, and to compensate for these differences, you'll need to adjust the gain control. Next, have a look at where the start and end markers are positioned and check that you're happy with them. If the record takes a little while to get going, you can set the start marker to come in a bit later, such as after 16 or 32 bars. This means that when mixing, you don't have to hear all of the introduction before the record gets to the good bits. An extra part to the setup process is covered in the tutorial Navigation and Outro Loops. This looks at placing warp markers to designate useful points in the record and how to set up a repeating loop at the end. It's worth having a look at the name of the audio clip. You should try and keep clip names clear and concise so that you can easily recognise them. You can also add in useful information such as the track's BPM or the key that it's been recorded in. I'm happy with the results of all of this, and so the final thing I'm going to do is click the Save button so that all of these settings are now saved with the audio file. With practice, you'll find that warping clips isn't actually that hard to do. Most songs that are made recently stay accurately in time, and it won't take you long to check them over and get them ready to use. If you want to include older songs within your set, then you should work on them carefully and make sure that they sound right. Most older records weren't recorded to a steady beat, and so these will require more warp markers to get them to stay in time. Before we finish, let's have a look at a couple of problems that you might come up against. Although Live is generally quite reliable at getting the overall tempo of a clip correct, it doesn't always get the phase right. This means that even if the warp markers are all in time, Live sometimes doesn't know where the first beat of the record's meant to be. In this situation, the easiest way to get the warp markers in the right place is to move them all at once. Zoom in so that you can clearly see the start of the clip, and then click on the first warp marker and press Ctrl or Command A to select all. You can then move all of the warp markers in one go to the position where you want them. One thing that can upset the whole warping process is if the audio file unexpectedly goes out of time. This can happen if you recorded the file off vinyl and the needle has jumped. If you're playing dance music, then the easiest way to solve this problem is to use an audio editor to remove a small section of audio such as 4 or 8 beats. If you do this carefully, you may be able to make it so that nobody will notice the change. The alternative approach is to do it all within Live. It may take a few warp markers close together to sort this out. What you're aiming to achieve is to make sure that the first beat of each bar still falls at the start of a bar in Live. That's it. You should now be able to confidently warp any clip that you import into Live. This is the end of the warping tutorial.